All right, everyone. Wow. Thank you very much for joining us at the annual PRC and Sports Commission meeting. I'm Marco Rivero. I am the staff liaison to the Park and Rec Commission. I will introduce John Mingus and Jill Barker, both from the Sports Commission and Park and Rec Commission. So please take it away.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'd like to, we have Dave Early.
Here.
Here he is. He's our brand new commissioner. He was just approved, this week. So, we'd like to welcome you, Dave.
Thank you.
All the work you've done behind the scenes. So let's get ready for him. Also our charter was passed this week. So, we're happy that that finally got through. I just want to make it known that Jane and team have a hard stop right at, is it,
7:30.
7:30. But, so ask as many questions as you can, but know that that's not the end of the discussion. We will be discussing among ourselves. Jane has to go and preach this a third time at the Board of Natural Resources. Okay, that's all I have for my welcome.
I'm John Mingus from the Sports Commission. I don't have a whole lot more to add. I guess let's just get into it and get started so we can get as much as we can on the budget.
Great.
Sounds good. So we will start off with public comment. Are there anyone from the public here or online that would like to make any comments? So you'll have up to 3 minutes. Hearing none, I guess we can get started on the presentation. So I'll introduce Jane Rudolph, Director for Department of Parks and Recreation.
Great, thanks, Marco. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I had a bunch of presentation at the board today. It was 2 hours, so I need a little love. I'm pretty tired, although I have to say, I really want to thank everybody here for joining Park and Rec and Sports Commission together, because that means instead of having to give the presentation 3 times today, I might have had to give it 4 times today. So you guys have definitely saved me at least one more presentation. And I also just want to thank you for doing this. I know this has become kind of a tradition of the missions, but I actually think it's a really lovely tradition. It gives you guys a nice chance to sort of cross-pollinate about what you're doing and sort of see how your interests actually align a lot more than you think. So I think it's really great. So as I said before, we had our presentation to the county board today. This was presenting the FY 2026 budget. And at the dais when I was there today, I was joined by Keisha Holland, who is our finance officer for our department, and she kind of really put all this together, so it was really awesome. And I'm also joined by Eric Beach, because this year, I guess I should introduce you. I feel like everyone knows Eric, but he's our division chief for
Park Division.
Park Development. I literally get it. I've been in this job for 12 years and I get it wrong every time, which
I don't know what that says.
I don't know what that says either. But we did something interesting this year. Is usually we don't combine capital and operating budgets when we give our presentation, but this year, because it's not a CIP year, we combined the two. I actually think for all of you, it's a better presentation because you often don't always feel a lot of time that the capital is like disjointed from our operating budget, or just disjointed from our operations in general. And actually, it's like super integrated into everything we do. So I actually really glad that we did it this way, and you guys can ask. And so Eric is going to pop up when his slides come on. So I'm going to go through this. I'll try to go through it quickly so we can save time for questions. Once we have questions, if there's any questions on any slides, we'll just go back to them. So this is just quick stuff. We went through our mission and vision and sort of tried to highlight pictures that kind of show what that vision, that sort of display that mission and vision. And then we were asked to sort of give some highlights. And so these are the 6 pillars of our internal or departmental strategic plan. And so there's just some highlights, things like we are the top number 5 best parks, urban park system or large park system in the nation by Trust for Public Land. Other things we highlighted were, it was the 70th anniversary of our 55+ program. And we have over 500 programs that we offer annually for that. We had over 15,000 summer camp registrations this year, which is pretty amazing. And finally, we also highlighted that we just completed our tree canopy study, which is something that's really important for us. Next slide. And so then we went through, every department's also asked and continues to be an important part of the county's sort of mission and vision overall about equity. In our department, we have a race and equity committee of staff who are really working on some interesting things around usage around the county and kind of looking at heat maps to understand where people are coming from. Some of that work I think is really neat. We're also looking at how we can better support our temporary staffs as they become permanent employees. So that's the work that we're doing. And then externally, obviously, we continue to push to have free and equitable, or at least affordable programs for the public. We continue to support the countywide special events that celebrate our culture and our heritage, like the Feel the Heritage event, MLK, Latino Americano. And actually, Feel the Heritage was this weekend. It was on Saturday. We had over 700 attendees. And Eric will talk more about how we are incorporating equity and how we select and move forward some of our capital projects. And so this is actually a couple slides about fiscal year 2025. In fiscal year 2025, we received a lot of funding, both for sort of trees and natural resources and teens, because we are park and recreation, right? So we actually have lots of sort of kind of often seeming disconnected lines of business that we oversee. So we got funding to do tree maintenance. We were actually are able to bring our tree pruning cycle from almost like over 15 years down to 5, which is an industry standard, which is pretty amazing. And we hired a new urban forester who started this past fall to implement the program. We also got funding for the Tree Canopy Fund. It's a fund that previously had been funded by dollars that came out of site plans that kind of dried up, which actually sounds kind of, we can talk about it, but it's actually a good thing because it basically means that when developers are developing their site plans, they are now planting trees on site. And they used to not. And so instead of not planting trees, they would give us funding to plant trees elsewhere in the county. And now that seems to be happening more on site. But the program is really amazing. It's the program to provide trees to private homeowners and other properties, because they do it also at churches and other areas. And it's administered by the Eco Action Arlington. So we got that funding, and we also got $300,000 for invasive plant management and one-time funding, which really helps to really eradicate invasive plants across the county. And we also, which a lot of people were thrilled about, we got funding to expand our nature center hours. Actually, in some regards higher than they were before COVID. And we were also able to hire a new center manager. That position was filled this fall. So some really great stuff on the natural resources front. And on the teens front, the other area where we are very involved, we got a lot of funding. That's about $2 million allocated over 2 years. That funding isn't just for DPR, it's also funding that's being used by DHS, Department of Human Services, libraries, and schools as well, but DPR got sort of the lion's share of it. Next slide, Mark. And then from that money, we have done things like expanded our TJ Gunson and Arlington Mill after-school programs. We've created a new after-school program at Kenmore that's 3 days a week. It's been really popular. And this winter, we started a 1-day-a-week program at Wakefield. We have really expanded our teen takeovers, our teen nights, our soccer and basketball late night programs have really taken off. And we have also created a college trip series. So far this year, we've taken them to UVA, JMU, and VCU, and we're going to a bunch more this spring. It's a partnership with HC, the Affordable Housing Group. We've taken 120 kids so far. So it's mostly Wakefield and then residents of AHC housing, and they're going to these schools, so that we take them on, which has been really cool. And then we've also had a partnership at the Aurora House, which is a home for girls who are somehow in the juvenile justice system. And our urban ag coordinator has been going there weekly to do after-school programs with them as well. So a lot of really cool stuff, and we've been doing some infrastructure projects at Arlington Mill as well to improve the areas where teens are going. Next slide. So specifically about this budget, we always have some challenges, rising costs, operating costs. Do we all see it? Like, everywhere we go, costs are rising. Vacancy and workforce management, we have employees consistently who are, a lot of employees who could retire if they would want to. We are expectations of maintaining high levels of service, yet we still also want to have more free and expanded affordable programs with these rising costs. And we also want to be more efficient and make sure that we continue to do all this with, my voice cracks, enhanced customer service. So this is a summary of our budget from last year compared to this year. So you can see it's about $65 million in operating, $8 million in revenue, and a FTE, that's our employee count, of over 409 employees, which is a combination of both permanents and temporary equivalents. And so we have a number of reductions. You may have heard that the county had a lot of, there's a very large budget gap. It's about, it's and they have to put forward a lot of cuts. It's been a kind of rough year. Ours are about a little over $800,000 in cuts. I have to say, because we've all been in this together for many years, I would say these cuts, I mean, no one likes taking cuts, but I would say for DPR this year, it's probably a better year than we've had in the past. So these are all freezes of, well, the first two are freezes of vacant positions. When I say freeze, it means that the positions are frozen for 1 year, not that they are going away. So they can be filled in fiscal year 2027. Should we get more cuts for 2027, we would look at our vacancies and determine maybe there are other positions that we want to freeze because it's time to fill these. So the first one is the deputy director position. Our deputy direction, I'm really tired. Our deputy director moved over to the county manager's office in August, and so that position has been vacant. The next one is the position actually here at Lover Run, but it's been vacant for a while now, and we feel like it could continue to be held. And the last one is 4 positions at our Parks and Natural Resources Division. We have 4 employees who are in the retirement system. They will be leaving about halfway through the year, exiting the retirement system, which we know is going to happen. They have to, based on a program we call DROP. And so we will be holding those positions for 6 months with the idea that after that 6 months of the new fiscal year, we will hire those positions. And those are in athletic field and maintenance, urban forestry, and park management. Next slide. We are proposing the closing of the Madison Community Center's preschool program. There are currently, the program used to be quite big. After COVID, it just seemed to never come back. It used to be a 5-day-a-week half-day program. It is now a 3-day-a-week half-day program, and there are 5 kids in the program, which is very small compared to our other locations, and 3 of those kids are going to kindergarten next year. There are 2 FTEs associated with it, 2 employees. One of them positions is vacant. The other position, we have somewhere for them to land somewhere else in our preschool program. So we think that this is not a cut that will, well, it's not, don't love it. We also don't think that the impacts won't be that big. The 2 kids who are left, if they want to stay in our programs, we have 2 other half-day programs at Arlington and Carlin Springs, and they will be offered slots. We are also proposing, can you go back? We are also proposing reduction of the county mowing contract for Bermuda grass, for 31 fields, right?
33.
33 fields to go from 2 days a week of mowing from 3 days a week to 2 days a week of mowing. And then finally, the elimination of funding for the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. We give them about a little over $86,000 a year. And so, like last year too, there are cuts and then there's proposed changes to add funding to our budget, which always feels a little schizophrenic, but I think that it has to do with priorities and needs. So the first one is, you may know, in December, the county board passed an MOU to change the relationship between us, the county, and the Arlington County Fair Board. The Arlington County Fair Board used to run the fair. We now, the county, will be running it. So that money that is being added to our budget will be offset by revenue collected at the fair. So this is the money that we need to do things like pay for overtime, have some temporary staff, and from other things from marketing to operations that we need to run the fair, and that will be offset by revenue. It's the only issue is if we have a really rainy fair and we may not get as much revenue in a given year, that could be an issue, but we will work that out and make sure that the fair always goes on. We also got additional funding for special events. Those are those events I was talking about on the race and equity slide. Those budgets have never been raised, at least as long as I know that I've been here. So the ongoing funding is just to help kind of deal with those increased costs for performers and operations and marketing. And the one-time funding is to help us purchase a stage and a AV system that we can use for all of our events. We've been renting it and the rentals have gotten incredibly expensive. So we think it's actually smart for us to buy it and get out of the rental business. The next is for deer management, which the board adopted an ordinance change actually this fall to enable us to do sharpshooting in parks. And the board has adopted the deer management program in general. So this is funding for us to do our first round of sharpshooting in parks starting in January 2026. One-time funding for invasive management, which sort of carries over previous year's work. Some funding for tree watering as well. Additional funding for that tree canopy study I talked about that we also got funding for last year. Last year was one-time funding from the operating budget. This time it's one-time funding from the stormwater fund. And then we'll get into this in a second, there's also some changes on Long Bridge, and I can talk us through that in a bit. And then finally, a DPR, because you have the Long Bridge. Yeah, and then also, we'll talk later on revenue, a 10% increase on our fees as well. So Longbridge, I just wanted to pause because you're Park and Rec and Sports about what's going on there. This slide just kind of gives an overview of where we are. Really, actually, I think, to be honest, a pretty amazing story. We've over 3,000, we anticipate almost 3,800 members this year. At the pool, my understanding at like APS pools, all three, they have 500 members. So when you think about the difference, Longbridge is really doing amazing. Longbridge is, but we always knew this going back to 2016, when we went back in the county, everybody said we want to do Longbridge, that there was going to be a funding gap, right? Like when you look around this center, all the facility staff isn't paid for by revenue. They're just paid for by net tax support. And Longbridge, even though we are making almost $3 million a year, it just doesn't pay for itself. And the $10 million that we got from Boeing to sort of oversee, sort of to fill the county gap will be running out. So in the next slide, we talk about a spend down plan. It was originally the Boeing money was supposed to run out in 2027. And we proposed to the board today a spend down plan that kind of slowly spends down the Boeing money and increases the county contribution over the next 5 years till 2031. I will say that at the work session today with the board, they asked us to come in with a different proposal. So we will be bringing back to them different proposals on the spend down plan for Boeing. They are concerned that the county will be going into a somewhat small recession or maybe regional recession in the next couple of years. And they wonder if we should be doing more on Boeing now and then worrying about it later on. So we will be coming back to the county board with a number of proposals for them to kind of look at and make a decision about what rate they want to start to fund Boeing at Longbridge at, and how they want to use the remaining Boeing money. So while you are looking at this, this is how we proposed it. It may change by the time we get to adoption. Next slide. And so revenues, we talked about a little bit. So our revenues actually are kind of showing that we're going down, and that is because of the proposed Boeing money, which is considered revenue, is going to make it that way. If we change the revenue, the Boeing amount, our revenue may actually show up as it going up. So I just want to be clear about that. But we are proposing bringing in, as I said, about $18 million in revenue. And one area we're always proud about is our fee reductions have just becoming more and more popular. We have over 1,000 unique households who are participating in our fee reduction program. We're increasing our budget next year for fee reductions because we anticipate we'll be closer to 1.8, and our current budget is only $1.1 million in fee reductions. And so, as I said before, fees are always really interesting to us and important to us. We really want to do a very large fee review across the board. We kicked it off last year. But Keisha has really been leading that effort, and her team is actually understaffed. We are missing a pretty key important position. We are hoping to bring that in this year. That position has also been vacant since August, right? Since August. And so once that position is filled, we can kind of pick back up on some of our look on it. But that said, we really didn't raise fees a lot. Kind of even before COVID, we just kind of weren't doing it. And so after COVID, we sort of realized that our fees were way below and not hitting cost recovery at all. Last year was the first time we really raised fees in a long time. We had a 7% fee increase. And then on the next slide, we are looking to do a 10% fee this year that goes across the board on every single program, classes, camps, all those across the board. And then on the next slide, you just can see some of what that would mean, the 10% increase with a couple of our types of programs. And you can see like some of our areas, families or participants may not feel the cut as much, anywhere from $3 to $10, they may not cut the increase. Some of our more really competitive programs where people are, engaged daily sometimes or year round, they might see a bigger hit. Although again, those are people who are in our program sometimes 5 days a week, year round. So then I'm going to turn over to Eric.
Sure. That was very brisk.
I'm going to answer questions. I'm talking like you were.
Yeah. Hello, so I'm Eric Beach, the Park Development Chief. I'm going to talk a little bit, just a couple slides on what we call the annual capital budget. And so annual capital budget is a portion of the operating budget they set aside to do smaller maintenance capital, repair playgrounds, do other kinds of fixes. I think the last time I've been here, I've been over to the commissions a couple times in between, but last year I came and did a 10-year CIP. 10-year CIP is every other year, and that's where you see our big projects like Gateway Park or the Boathouse or the Natural Resiliency Fund or emerging uses. So what we could talk about those programs if you want tonight, but that's not what the capital maintenance or what we call PAYGO sort of fondly is about. This is kind of a smaller, much smaller little portion for us to do some projects and move things along, keep things in good repair. So Martin, you can go to the slide. And so overall, that PAYGO, or what we call the annual capital budget, is $3.3 million for proposed in FY '26. Basically, that's divided into 3 buckets. Those buckets are PAYGO, which is sort of pay as you go maintenance is what it's short for. Is proposed at $1.6 million. Short-term finance is about $1 million. And we're proposing using some existing bonds, so it's not really a request, but we're making the board aware that we're using some existing bond and we have to do some maintenance work. It's a bit different from last year's adopted. Last year's adopted for FY '25 was about $8.5 million. But the majority of that was part of the Kenmore Field conversion, because there was a cost split with APS and money being raised by some outside organizations. And so in order to fund that project, those money coming in as part of that budget, if you will, so it showed us 8.5. It's not really that big of a reduction, but it shows that way if you were just to look straight at the numbers. We have a couple that are sort of a yearly annual budget line. One is our capital asset manager. This is the staff position that basically does our asset management work, works with our inventory and reviews sort of the life cycle, where they are in their life cycle for all of our things. I'll talk a little bit more on that in a minute. As well as manage our trail and bridge program, and is the sort of a critical resource for building our capital and our PAYGO budget. So this is a position that supports that. Our Parks Field Fund is a sort of a parking spot for the funds that come in from the fees that are assessed to the user groups. It's landed in this fund and then it goes out of this fund. So it's kind of a request, but it's just more of a tracking mechanism for the board. Take a brief minute. Our asset management and focus on equity. So obviously you guys all have been in our parks. DPR has thousands of assets that we have to deal with, right? So you think about a playground, it's got benches, it's got picnic tables, sports fields have benches and bases and mounds and all kinds of things. And so not to mention the number of trash cans and picnic tables we have out there. So a few years ago, we went through and we brought in a consultant and we did a inventory of all those things, and sort of the remaining useful lifespan was assessed. And it allowed us to basically prioritize individual assets where they would be in ranking. And then if you wrap those up for individual parks, you can set that park on a ranking. And so you know from a scale of 0 to 100, what our priorities are across our 170 something parks. That was great for us from a purely physical kind of things, like what's in worse shape, how do we prioritize it? We want to take it a little farther. And so over the last 2 years, we have been working on what we call an equity factor. We take from the equity dashboard that the county has. We use the greatest ethnic diversity, greatest household density, number of children, and the lowest average income, and we apply that to do that analysis for every census tract in the county. That is then a formula that combines those, and then it sort of levels that on a scale of 0 to 100 to match our asset work that we do, and they're combined. So out of sort of 200 points, it helps us set. And what it does, basically, it allows us to look at neighborhoods that have that greatest ethnic density, diversity, the youth population, and the lowest income, and determine where the poorest parks are located in that. And basically, it's a way to help us set a priority for our funding. So it's basically help level the equity gap for us on when we're selecting our projects for the capital program. Next slide. So this year, we have 2.5 asks, I'll say. We have a playground at Cherrydale that is looking for about $500,000 design money. Anybody might be familiar with Cherrydale. Cherrydale's on a very awkward kind of location. It's a legacy playground, but it's on very, very steep, severe ADA access issues. And so we finally believe we found a way access issues, as well as the retaining walls that are around it. And so this will allow us to go in and make the upgrades that we've been hearing from the community there as far as the playground and its facilities. Douglas Park Phase 2 is design money for $733,000. This is Douglas Park East, what we call it. The board approved work for the west side a couple of years ago. The west side is more what you might call the natural side. It has some shelters, it has trails, it has a stream running through it. And so we started down that work, working to improve the canopy and invasives and things like that. It's in design right now. And this is now will allow us to go to the east side, which is the playground, and the more active side of that park. And so those are the two parks that are part of this process. And then we have $600,000 that we're proposing for our existing bond balances to do 6 playgrounds, rework their safety surfacing. And so rather than having to go in and do a full renovation, we'll be able to get in and deal with the safety surfacing that's underneath, like the swings and the slides and all that. Because if you get out to our parks, some parks, Rocky Run, for example, is on the list. There's so much usage there. People swinging, just wear right through that stuff. And it's kind of unbelievable, but it does just wear away. And so this will allow us to go in and make those improvements. We always, the last few years, we have been managing our synthetic field program, turf program, replacement out of the PAYGO budget. We use that through what we call short-term financing. And that is this year is $1 million to replace, believe it or not, the synthetic on field 3. This will be the second replacement of that. Having worked on that originally, I can't believe we're that many years into it, but we are there, and that will get its replacement. The FY27 ash, just so people know, will be the other 2 fields, Long Ridge 1 and 4. So this is a cycle that we go through for 10 years. And I think
Yeah, so this is really our last slide, which is to talk about future challenges. Future challenges is a nice way to say where we might need funding in the future. And we want to make sure that the board, everyone else aware of what this might be. So public spaces master plan is one of our big plans. It's actually going to be re-ups this coming year. So we actually be working with all of you again to do some updates. The forestry natural resource plan had some real budgetary impacts, like the deer program came out of that, tree canopy came out of that. So we will continue to see that we want to bring forward projects from both those plans that have funding impacts. Staffing needs, we just always make sure that that's like first and foremost. Today, I actually very specifically highlighted some challenges that we have both in parks and natural resources, particularly on the park management side, where we can really use some extra staff. And then on the community recreation and athletic and facility services, the ongoing need for converting some of our temporary employees to permanent employees. It's a project we've been doing for over 10 years, and there's still some outstanding conversions that need to happen. On the recreation program, continuing to offer affordable programs is really important to us. We talked already about Boeing. Again, continuing to have our good programs, and again, park management. One area specifically, and Jill spoke about it today on the park management, is not just about having the staff, but also having the funding to do certain things. So for example, our invasive plant management has been funded. We have some funding in our base budget, but for the past few years, the additional money we got, which we really appreciate, has been one-time funding, and we really hope that the board will consider making it base budget so that we can rely on it, because things like invasive management and others are not just a single year project. And so when you get funding that's only 1 year, it can be very concerning, because if we really don't get it, say next year, some of the areas that we have worked to clear will revert back to what they were before. We won't be able to keep up with it. So there's a lot of sort of future needs, and obviously those need to be balanced against other priorities in the county outside our department. So I did try to go quickly because I know you guys, and you typically have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure there was time for that. So thank you. Yes.
Chair, if you'll allow me, is it okay if we recognize those that are online first? Sure. Any members from the Sports Commission or Park and Recreation Commission, do you have any questions for those that are attending online? Hearing none.
Why don't we just hands? Who has questions? I know some people have questions. Dave, you want to go first? You don't have to.
No, thank you. I guess,
First meeting.
yeah, no, thank you for the presentation and going through the, particularly the budget reductions. And the Madison preschool program, it makes a lot of sense, right? Cost recovery is a fraction of what you look for. But it's just that point that I have a question. Are the other 2 programs better than this?
Better attended.
Better intended. So, Keisha, would you mind putting that, would it be possible to put that We have 16,000 in revenue and expense of 124. With 5 children, 16,000, it's about 3K per child.
Yes.
You would need 40 children to be fully cost recovery with the same amount of staff, which is impossible. 20 children would give you half as, 50% recovery, which may be the goal. I don't know. But so I was just, obviously going to raise the fees. This would be one of the programs that would be higher fees. The question is, is this an offering that actually meets the objectives of the county?
So in the, you're talking about the other programs.
Well, I'm talking about the part-time preschool, right? We're talking
So
about,
the Madison one does not meet the county's objectives of cost recovery, which is one of the reasons why we were
course.
suggesting to cut it. The other two locations, Fairlington and Carlin Hall, are pretty much full. I think it's between 16 and 18 kids every day. And yes, at some point we can come back and have a longer conversation about our cost recovery model, but our cost recovery model is a pyramid where the top of the pyramid is sort of like highest and most individual use, and it kind of scales down, and it tries to reflect it reflects also the county's sort of values, and childcare is considered value that's important. So there is a county subsidy to it. Last year, in FY 2025, we cut what was called a personal training program because that was considered to be the top highest use, and yet we were having terrible cost recovery. And there was a very large subsidy, and you would probably be very unhappy if you learned how much the county was paying for it for a very individual use. And so we do try to look at our programs and put forward reductions that aren't meeting the cost recovery.
so, great, thank you. So let's say the programs of 18 kids, roughly 20. Would the cost base be about the same, 1.25 FTE for
Yes.
18 kids? So they're about 50% recovered. That makes sense from a policy perspective. You're saying that's a priority. Great, thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, I do have a question regarding the one-time funding that we're seeing for some of the invasives or the tree or the tree programs or that. I think it's probably be the next slide.
It's the next one.
Yeah. Given how many of those programs are one time, but it's in like a single, just for 1 year, I'm curious as to why it was allocated similarly to that rather than say half 1 year, half the next. Because you're all right about invasive species, that the management very much has to be ongoing. And it seems like the stability of funding, even at a lower level, is there a reason that it was explicitly meant for 1 year rather than having stability of funding for 2 or 3 years at lower levels?
So deer management is 1 year because we are doing a specific task in 2026 and we wouldn't be coming back. We may come back to do it again another year. But one, the county doesn't have, because of the gap, the county doesn't have a ton of money to allocate to ongoing funding. It does sometimes have some funding left over at other discretionary areas, which is why they are able to sometimes do one time. On the invasive management, we are making the case this year to ask for it to go into the base budget to be ongoing because of what you specifically said. Contracted tree watering, yes, it would be nice if it could be ongoing, but those trees that we are watering are newly planted. And it's great that we're getting it for this year. It would be great if it was in future years, but it doesn't have that same effect that the invasive had, which is that it's not gonna revert. So we do think that again, the tree watering would be nice if it was added to our contracts, but we appreciated the 1 year. And then the tree canopy fund, as I noted before, came from site plan developers. So there may actually be a chance in the future that the site plans start to replenish it. We actually anticipate a site plan coming forward this June or July. I think you don't find out about it. That may actually be getting to start putting some funding back. So we actually intentionally kept it one-time funding so that we could evaluate if there's site plan money coming in, do we need to ask as much each year?
Thank you.
So just to piggyback off what Jane said, that $100,000 that you're seeing in invasive management, we do have a base budget of around $110,000. So it's not like if this money goes away, we have no invasive money. This one-time funding allows us to expand the existing invasive program. So we still have some invasive money to do annual.
Thank you.
Marco?
Yeah, I wanted to recognize Carl Monaro.
Hi, everyone. I had a question, really just to find out if there are plans underway to plan for potential population displacement due to changes being proposed to the federal workforce. What plans are being considered to account for potential reduction in cost recovery, as well as decreased tax revenue to support bonds?
So the county is doing a lot. There are a lot of trainings and sessions. I really encourage anybody who's interested, just go to the county website. You'll see, posts about what they're trying to do. Don Byer is actually having a sort of a jobs fair or something, actually coming up. So that's on our county website, and DPR is sort of assisting in the process. I would say specifically for DPR, one, that we have our fee reductions, which we always sort of try to make sure people are aware of. One other program that people are maybe a little less aware of, but it's always been out there, but we are promoting it more, and we are making sure that it's out there as well. It's called our hardship policy. I think we developed it about 10 years ago when there was one of the big furloughs and people were out of jobs for a couple of months. And what that hardship policy is supposed to do is be a bridge, because a lot of our federal workforce potentially actually at one point did not qualify for our fee reductions per se. Like they, might be a household that has 2 jobs, and now they may be out of a job. So we want to be able to work with families, even if it's temporary, or any participant that matter, to ensure that they can still actively participate. So we often do a hardship policy, which enables to sort of be a bridge for people to ensure that they can continue to be in our programs, and then also help them from there, if it seems like it's going to be more long-term, to then get into the fee reduction program. We continue to be committed, and our board is committed to the fee reductions, and we recognize, and we will keep you posted, that if people are we're getting more and more people on fee reductions, we will have to make the right budget adjustments. But my feeling from the work session today is that our board is not interested in service reductions as a result of the fact that we may have to have more fee reductions. So, we hope that obviously we hope for everyone to end up where they need to be, but we want to make sure that at least they can participate in our programs, in that way.
If I could just follow up on that. So totally understand that even with more people on fee reduction, there's still income coming in. But if we have a significant portion of the workforce moving out of the area, then we lose that revenue completely. Is there anything anticipated to plan for that?
I think the county as a whole is planning for that. It's more outside of us. The county manager, when he gave his budget presentation, talked about the fact that he felt like this could almost be like a COVID year, where like they presented the budget and adopted in April and then redid the budget again in May. So I think that should the county take a major hit on revenues, if people were in fact leaving the county at that level, we would, and I'm not trying to say anything about my programs, but we will probably having a much bigger conversation than just Park and Rec, because it would affect schools and a lot of other areas as well. So I think we are poised to have that conversation, and it would be much more expansive than just DPR.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about the Long Bridge Aquatics Center slide. So with like a few months left in the fiscal year, the current revenue for this one is like 1.75, which is pretty far off from like last year. Do you have like a projection of like expectation that that's gonna like land pretty close to last year? And then kind of like your longer term kind of balancing the Boeing funding with like the revenues from Long Bridge, if those are evening out, what's kind of like the expectation of like cascading effects across like the other facilities or things like that to meet the needs of like that funding?
So first of all, yeah, so if you looked at this, we did a very similar slide last year, and the numbers were actually very similar at the same time. We anticipate there are a fair amount of membership renewals that still need to happen between now and the end of the fiscal year. And so we do think that the revenues will be there to match it. So we can obviously come back or share with you guys information at the end of the fiscal year once we have a better sense, if you're interested. So we do anticipate that we will be close to where we were last year. In terms of the funding, that is sort of what we're showing on the next slide, which is that the Boeing funding does not equal the revenue. So, and it never has. And that's why we need to replace the Boeing, or the expectation is that there will be county funding to come in and replace it with net tax support. And that is the question of how much and when those county dollars are going to come in. They are not looking to take money away from other facilities to cover Longbridge. They are anticipating allocating new county dollars to help us ensure that Longbridge stays open. Longbridge is kind of a tricky thing for us to think about. It will, if we were asked, and we could be by the board at some point, to bring in more revenue, there are opportunities to that, but that will then take away from the public's opportunity to use the center. So right now, we offer pretty affordable classes for kids to learn how to swim. We have a lot of public swim time where the public can just come in and swim in laps. We try to have a good balance between rentals and pool usage and keep it really what was built for, which was supposed to be a community facility. If there was a desire for us to make it more profitable, what would go away is the community use of the facility. It would become a very heavy rental facility where we were renting it out for weekends for events and bringing in more and more private clubs. And so the county, at least in 2016, when Eric and I, and a couple others spent a lot of time reconfirming the public's interest, the public really wanted a community facility. So that was, at that time, the board was open to understanding that there was going to need to be some net tax support to support the facility.
Is there any, just following up on that, any plan or expectation or even thought about trying to get another private partner to replace Boeing? To provide some supplemental headline funding for that?
So, I mean, that would be super nice. If you guys know anybody, call me. I mean, I'm happy to go with you. We are kind of heading towards a model more and more where we are partner with nonprofits and with corporates to raise money for some of our projects. We have it at Kenmore, as many of you know. We have it at Gateway. There is a funding gap for the boathouse. So it is definitely becoming a new reality that we might have some corporate or other partners. The Boeing money is a little tricky because it is running out, but there's also, their name is on the, right now is on the indoor 50-meter pool area. And that was a 10-year deal. Although if we do that by 2020, by 2030, we'll.
Yeah, it's 20.
I thought it was the other way around. So the field would have it in the indoor.
Let's verify that.
Yeah, we have to verify. I think it was the other way around. It's good. But anyways, that said, yes, we can look into it, but it's not super, to be totally transparent, it's not super easy for government like me to go do fundraising per se. Boeing was a sort of long-term thing that we had been working on, and they basically came and gave us funding the week after Amazon announced Arlington. And that, so even though we've been working it for like 15 years. So I do think it would be interesting. I think we'd have to work with economic development and kind of come up with a strategy.
But considering all the swim teams, sorry, not to beat this up, but considering all the swim teams and the way that the soccer and the baseball teams came together for Kenmore, you know, anyway, just something.
Potentially, but you need big money. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
I have kind of a very small question. You mentioned something about the mowing going from
Yeah.
3 days a week to 2 days a week on the Bermuda
Yeah.
grass fields. And have they ever done that before?
We have,
Yeah,
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 we've also had like, just the way August and some of the years, been like the way it's been going. We actually, it's been pretty dry for a bunch of summers, and so we don't anticipate this actually having a major impact.
Okay.
If it is, particularly if we have a very wet season,
yeah.
I
I feel
think
like,
we might be,
I
there
feel
are,
like when it happened, we had issues with the grass being too long for rectangular sports on those fields. So I just was curious, like, it means, is it like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday mow, or is it a Monday, Tuesday? I mean, like, how is that scheduled or not scheduled?
We get back to you.
yeah, it's a cycle of space. It's not like every field goes out, gets voted on the same day, so it's
Right.
during the week. I mean, this is an area where the sports commission might want to be a little more,
Yeah,
I'm not telling you about this, but you know, this might be your area to
okay, okay,
focus.
okay.
If we have a really dry season, like, it might not be as bad. If we
I
have a really wet
remember we
season,
had problems, and so I don't know if I
Encourage you to-
necessarily believe the dry season, but
Yeah, baseball teams have mowed fields. When the
You have.
grass is too high.
yeah, yeah, I remember we had issues where people are like, oh my gosh, like, there's, you know,
so this could be an area where sports can be fun.
okay,
I'll leave it at that.
okay.
Yeah, I'm writing the paragraph now. I do have a question about the field fund. In your 10% increase, is that increasing the field fund challenge? just putting it out there that that was set 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think it's been touched yet, so could be an opportunity for revenue at some point.
So I would welcome the sports commission to maybe have a conversation with you about that as we move into next year's budget, but it's not a fee, so I think it would involve more engagement than as we did this across the board, so if the sports commission would
So
be
maybe
interested.
after you try that sport thing, giving my successor a task, so the sports commission for next year's budget should take this under consideration.
Or we can talk about it during the year so that we actually sort of put it up in part of our budget as well. Like, so, you know, we're all on the same page going into the budget, we can actually propose it too. You want us to propose it as part in with our fees, but yeah.
Can somebody give a 2-sentence explanation of the field plan? I'm not sure.
Greg?
Sure, so the field fund is an assessment that our partner organizations, so groups like Arlington Soccer, Little League, Maple League, use. Instead of renting field space, they pay their fee for our spring and fall season. Instead of it just going into to the general fund, it goes into a holding account, and that gets used to support capital projects or athletic field maintenance. We added 2 additional staff, but it's a fund specifically that our leagues pay as an alternative, and helps go back into supporting those facilities.
And that one increases.
Can I just add that the money actually comes from the players,
Right.
families. It goes to the organization pay it, but they're more of a pass through in most cases.
Thank you.
Yep.
That helps.
Sorry, so I'm, as a representative of the competitive gymnastics community, I noticed, we have a line item there, and I just would like to note that, as you stated, there was a 7% increase last year. This year, there's gonna be a 10% increase, so that's a 17% increase for us. And if you look at the actual, you can keep going, there's a line just for competitive gymnastics. Just wondering, how the cost of the competitive gymnastics program compares with other county programs and other gyms that might be close by in Fairfax. It is a big difference for a lot of families, I think. And my concern would be that gymnastics is going to become a wealthy child sport, and a lot of middle income kids, it's one thing you do offer cost, reductions for lower income children, but for kids that are middle of the road, this could sort of put that out of reach for them. And so that's my concern, is like parents are gonna say, look, last year we paid, $7,000. This year, next year, it's gonna be over 8. A lot of money for your middle income.
Right, so I'm happy to answer or talk towards it. We use this and was specifically to call out, because we have like hundreds of these, right? We want to make sure that we were being very transparent here about, to the public, that we have, it is a big wide variety. Our competitive gymnastics program is one of our programs that we consider pretty highly personal, and it does not really hit at all close to our cost recovery goals. So we've been sort of trying to incrementally get us ourselves there. I hear you on the fee reductions. There are anywhere from 75 up to 25% increases. So there are people who could qualify for 25 because you said they're middle income families. We also enable for these programs to have people pay an installment billing so that they are not taking a hit at one time. And when you see those really high numbers, those are for the most competitive kids who are in our gym multiple times a week, sometimes 7, sometimes 5, sometimes 5. Yeah, but all
5 days,
all throughout the year. So when I have that number up there, that is not like the cost of like $8,000 for 1 week of a program.
No, yeah, it's the whole year.
It is the whole year. So
I'm in that group of the highest.
So we do look at other jurisdictions. Well, we don't look at other jurisdictions. We look at the private clubs and some of the other jurisdictions, try to make sure our fees are somewhat aligned. But it's hard for us because we are not private sector and our employees are government workers who have really high benefits and we have a lot of costs that are associated that are not always incurred at private gyms. And so it's hard for us sometimes to benchmark ourselves against it when we also have to be able to pay for our employees. I will note, like all of our facilities, though, many of the facility costs at Barcroft are not being incurred in those fees. That's still being paid for by the county on a net tax board. I'm happy to talk about it with you some more separately as well. I know Ben, right behind you, reached out to everybody to share the information as well. Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think this is a very thoughtful approach to some pretty typical budget challenges, and we hope there won't be more, though there may be. But I'd say that's with one exception, and that is the elimination of the funding to the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. I think that would effectively end a very productive collaboration between the Conservation Trust and Arlington that Arlington's got a lot of benefit from. And it's actually counted on the trust to do some of the work that Arlington has not been able to do. The trust has, does not have a lot of excess funds. So this would pretty much end their collaboration with us. And I think that would be a pity, and it would make it much harder for us to meet many of the natural resource and conservation goals the county has worked very hard on.
so I think your ears should have been burning when Jill gave her testimony, because she definitely spoke about that in hers, as did Caroline Haynes. So you're definitely getting your chairs were both very much coming out strong for NBCT. I know that they are putting together a pretty big campaign, and I encourage all of you to continue to participate with them in trying to get their funding restored. It comes up and sometimes we have cuts, and it's just a budget decision, and it's happening in other places as well, where these nonprofits that the county are funding, you have this cut, which is also equivalent of an FTE for me. And so as you're seeing this year, we had over $1 million in cuts last year, and BCT was not up last year, about over 800,000 this year. When we have to make choices, sometimes our partners end up there. But I would encourage you individually, and then I'm sure as commissioner will be in your letter.
Yeah. I might take a bit of the minority view here, in that I do see and anticipate that there will be challenges in the upcoming months and years, given the potential issues facing the federal workforce and how that will impact Arlington. And to what you said earlier, that say during COVID, they had to redo the budget because the dramatic change that we saw meant that everything was up in the air. We had to redo the finances. I am very worried that that will be the case here in Northern Virginia if there is some form of regional recession. And while we are, the interest group representing parks, we don't want to see any programs cut. I mean, I don't want to see any youth programs cut. I don't want to see any productive partnerships ending. But at the end of the day, I do think things will get worse than we're anticipating right now. And right now, this budget does look pretty nice, but I don't think it's going to hold up. I ultimately think that, and be it fewer people eating out, and the dining tax money is curtailed, whether property tax values go down because more people have to move out of the area. I don't know, but ultimately, I mean, if it was up to me, which it is not, I would be much more willing to face cuts, because I'd rather see something like more of a single digit decline one year rather than having us go off a cliff because we didn't make cuts earlier. But I, of course, trust the judgment of the commissioners, but I do think that we might have a very different conversation in 6 months, a year, 18 months, because there is a lot of uncertainty out there. I do hope it goes well, but we do face a lot of challenges, and I can't find something to complain too much about in this budget, because it is a bit of a rosy picture when I think things are going to get worse.
Time check, it is 7:26, so another 4 minutes.
Nelson, Daniel.
I had a question about that deputy director role. So I think you mentioned the previous deputy director moved to the county manager's office. And I'm curious sort of what the scope of that role was and how you all are covering it like operationally moving forward with that extended vacancy.
So, yeah, Jennifer, he already went to the county manager's office to become the climate policy lead. And she used to oversee basically all the administration in our department, so the finance office, public relations office, and our office. Those leaders like Keisha now report directly to me. And we're having lots of fun. So that's been really good. I think we've hired a really awesome team, so that group, I would say Jen had left like 10 years ago. I've been like, I don't know, 5 years ago, even I would have felt a little lost, but the strength of the team right now has been really great. She also spearheaded a couple of really big projects for us. So while she was leaving, those projects were kind of ending. She spearheaded and led the forestry natural resources plan development, and she also spearheaded the deer work. So, and she took us through the ordinance change adoption in December. So we had these sort of two big projects that she was sort of the lead on, and they kind of, and not just ended, but then the implementation is being done really well between Ryan, in what?
Right.
Yeah, Ryan Delaney in Eric's office, and then John Marlin over in Parks and Natural Resources have really taken it on. So I feel like this combination of, we've made a couple of really great hires across our organization. Some of her projects are ending, and then we've been able to redistribute some of the projects that she did. So she was our legislative liaison to the county manager's office. We just have somebody else doing that now. She managed a lot of our sort of independent donation collaboration programs. Again, we found somebody else to sort of take those things on. So I wouldn't say that it's easy peasy, but I would say that I feel like a lot of people have risen to the challenge. So we feel comfortable, and it is a really large dollar amount, to be honest. And so I've kind of also made the case that I would rather hold that than have to maybe cut 3 positions that also equal that amount. So I think we feel comfortable holding it for another year. When I come back next year, I look really haggard, maybe I'll feel good. Right now, I feel good.
Thank you so much, Jane.
We can stay.
I work in the federal government, I'm a budget analyst, and yes. The question is, want to ask you is, assuming we go into a steep recession and stuff, have you prioritized additional cuts already in your mind? Because we probably will have to run this exercise in another 3 or 4 months.
So, I don't always think my other departments do it, but we kind of are always keeping track of all the cuts we propose. We also keep track of all the cuts we proposed for the past almost like 5 or 6 years. So I'm kind of constantly thinking that we're about to like hit a cliff, and I'm kind of ready for that. Eric is also looking at it from the capital perspective as well, because when COVID happened, it wasn't just our budget, it wasn't just the operating budget that got hit. We actually also postponed a number of projects as well. So I think we are always at this point kind of thinking in those terms and can anticipate. The county manager also in his budget laid out, there is another section which if you can find, that talks about additional cuts in areas that could potentially happen if we really need to shut down. And there are things in there from DPR that are being laid out. So
Is that been published yet?
Yep. Yep, it's in the budget.
Okay.
We can send you, John, the page tomorrow if you want. So it lays out additional cuts, and some of them are pretty significant, like facility closures and other things, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's a footnote on page 53 or?
I don't know which, it's a separate attachment to the budget. We will
That's
make you.
not fair. Already, yeah.
Yeah. But it came out on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah, he kind of put out 2 different documents. One was a list of things that he would like to fund if he could. And the other one is additional cuts if the board were not to take some of the revenue or other additions that he made this year,
Okay.
that he would have to go back and look at others. And so some of them are could be pretty significant.
Okay. It's good to know that you're planning and thinking. All right. Any other? questions? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all this
It's you
hard.
guys.
We really appreciate everything you do for the county.
Yeah, and as you guys are developing your letters, or whatever, if you have questions, just, pop them over to Jill or John and we'll help you guys answer them.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying, yeah, now you get to go to forestry. Yeah.
Sure.
So they just have them dial in here.
Wouldn't that have been nice? I feel like they're gonna be a tough crowd, so.
So I'm gonna change the. While they're leaving, so the idea is we're gonna have some small tables, and the idea is to mix in between the sports and the parks, that I can have table discussions. One is an icebreaker, and the next one is about the budget. If there's some things about it that you want to say, that you haven't, you have more questions you might have, you know, this is the time to do that. And then the second topic is going to be talking about the programs that we have. And, we'll have a note taker at each table and, then John and I can look at the notes as we draft up our letters for the budget. So, does that sound good? Did I say that right?
Yes. So what that means for sports commission folks is one of us per table, just so we're.
Oh, is that right? All right, so
There's
now-
about 6 of us.
Yeah.
And call online.
Yeah.
The,
Okay.
food cold in our commission pretty hard. There's like 4 different people. Yeah. Well, Dave. 3 rounds. And then.
For those joining online, we're going to be doing the small group discussions. It's pretty current, as well as. So please hang tight and we'll win this.
Glad to be able
Just haven't, it's gone on fine for a little bit. Thanks for all the, you will, everyone get it tomorrow. Yeah, there's, physically, you're 26 bucks, and then DPR. So it's basically.
何も聞こえない。
really going forward. Lots of good comments. Unfortunately, a lot of people talk.
All right, everyone, thank you again. So we're rejoining the larger group and, I guess we'll turn over to John and Bill to kick us off. Thank you.
Go first.
So what we'll do, I think what we'll try to do, and we have about 15 minutes or so, just real quickly. If your table was a happy table and you want to share, or if your table wasn't and you want to share what you, so our table was a nice mix of folks. We, for purposes of our letters, Jill, the budget stuff,
Yeah.
the concerns that sort of came up were sort of that dread caution of what happens if things go south, making sure they're sort of planning for that. Really wondering about the fee increases a little bit, in so much as, yes, we know there's a cost recovery model, but 17% across 2 years is a pretty significant chunk, and maybe think about spreading it out. Not trying to use another 10% this year, top of the 7% from last year. Thinking about the mowing a little bit to really think about, I know 2 versus 3 doesn't seem like a lot, but there's a situation where it could be. And also the issue of Long Bridge, about the sort of that trade-off between community use and rental, that if budgets are tight, perhaps thinking about more rentals isn't the worst thing. And we also sort of talked about the fact that the bifurcated nature of pools in Arlington now, with APS doing whatever they're doing, their programming in their pools, and DPR doing their pools, and not cross fertilization of those ideas, means that that whole community use versus rental isn't really being coordinated in a way that it could be otherwise. Sorry, folks, I just added that. And then in terms of the second question about programming, so the folks from your commission said the PRC would like more recreation briefings about things going on the recreation side.
Yeah.
Also sort of summer camps, not just the ones that we all register for, that parents register for, but are there ways to create drop-in summer camp opportunities for folks?
Okay. In fact,
Also-
we just asked today to have, the summer camp, come to our next meeting, so the summer camp staff.
Also beginning to think about cycling support. Yeah, there was the idea when JD was being built of maybe putting a pump track there, but thinking about, is there someplace in the county that a pump track or some other cycling facilities could be done, because there's not a whole lot there. Emphasizing nature center programming, especially for kids, make sure that families know that that's out there. Thanks to Claire, I'm now nowhere taking my grandson this weekend. Also, how cool the senior programs are, and the number, just, you go to a community center, you see how many seniors are participating in various programs. So that's what we took care
You guys have a happy
of. Somebody else want to go? George?
We can go. We were a sad table. Likewise, concerns about budget, and whether or not we're going to be revisiting this conversation in a couple months, with some pretty dire cuts, and wondering, where those cuts might come from. There were some questions about fees and whether or not, we're benchmarking correctly against other counties, and specifically, remarking about the gymnastics fees, and, just like how exorbitantly high they are, and what impact that they may have on the families, especially families with multiple athletes. We were looking at the field fund, we're trying to find some alternatives to help bridge any revenue gaps that might be apparent. Field fund is that something that, could be additionally applied to maintenance and helping to close the maintenance gaps? Is there any possible upward room. I think it's what, $7 per player. You know, could there be some entertainment about even increasing that, if that's, you know, that's always opening up a can of worms, I think, across leagues, but maybe as revenue sources. Also, sponsorships, yeah, you know, with the idea that Boeing is sunsetting in a couple of years. You know, hoping that the county can get resourceful without looking at additional replacement sponsorships. Probably unrealistic to get somebody to come in, you know, with a double-digit million price tag that Boeing paid to put its name on various different pools. But are there alternatives that could be even smaller or piecemeal? And that is maybe something that, you know, the county might want to explore and try to do with a little bit more detail. And then try to finish on a happy note. Was happy to see some of the trees being well taken care of in the budget, even despite some of the cuts. But you know, that's something that was encouraging and hopefully will continue.
Did you guys think about the program separately or just like, oh, we just had one large discussion?
Yeah, just one large discussion. And then that's the fault.
All right, next, that's it. Okay, another table?
Not yet, but, you know, we had a very random, sort of discussion.
Right?
Chill, at the same time, Good. So, but feel free to jump in on it's that, you know, we talked about, field conditions, we talked about the concern over the price of replacing artificial turf fields, that amount being pretty shocking. We talked a little bit about the fees and whether bumping them up significantly is going to be a problem or not. Initially, we were feeling it, okay, that might be a problem, but then the more we thought about it, like, yeah, maybe not so much of a problem here. We talked a bit about parking,
Wow.
parking structures. So we can say that kind of.
Well.
It came up in the context of Quincy Park. Then it's gonna be coming up as a, you know, master plan. And just, you know, the idea of like underground parking versus parking and the expense of that, whether we need to plan for as much parking as we have in the past. Do we need as big of a lot at Quincy as we used to, that kind of thing. We also talked about preschool programs. Because even like when they take away that preschool program, there's only gonna be 18 kids in the program. And it just seems to be like, why is DPR in the business of doing preschool for 18 kids, really inefficient? Should we be looking at, should some of that money be going toward APS for APS to expand their programs? Or is there another way we can do that rather than having DPR support 18 kids in the county? They're not really making much of a dent in the lack of daycare. And so why are we doing that? And then we also talked about like there's a missing market in terms of potential revenue from sports programs. The 20 to 40-year-olds, single adults, there aren't really a whole lot available. Most people have to go to like the private sports sport. The problem with that though is that a lot of the fields aren't available because all the youth sports, there's already not enough youth sports. But just another area that they could get revenue is by having programs for the 20 to 40-year-old age groups.
Yeah.
And then just overall, maybe doing some more marketing of the programs that are available to help build revenue, get more people to use them.
Okay,
Anything else that was?
It was really comprehensive.
good.
So Adam, as part of the thinking, and because obviously 20 to 40-year-olds seem like youth to me. Is part of the thinking you sponsor more of those, you know, kickball leagues and so on, are so popular in the district, people go play here, they spend their money in Arlington. Is that part of the thinking?
I mean, that could, I mean, it wasn't necessarily we talked about, but I think that's certainly an added benefit is that they're staying in Arlington and using programs. But I think it's more a matter of just making the residents feel like they're getting more for their money too by having, programs that are for them. There's it's a lot for kids and youth, there's a lot for older adults, but not necessarily for that middle range.
Is that universally thought to be true? I mean. Okay.
Well, I can say there's certainly, I mean, I shockingly, I can talk about the soccer side of it. I mean, the county doesn't run a very successful soccer drop-in program 3 nights. There's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night program right now that at least one of the sessions filled up in under 2 hours. So, and pre-pandemic, the county did rent fields to DC Fray and similar type organizations, so. Right, I don't know.
Yeah, we do still rent to adult leagues. We also run several large leagues. Adult softball is our largest. We have about 90 to 100 teams every spring.
What?
In fall, we're about 80 or so teams. We do adult basketball, adult indoor soccer at the tent, at the Guston tent. So there's several programs we run, something that we're continuing to work with, and then we work with different, we have adult partner leagues, so like Arlington Co-ed Kicks, Arlington Women's Soccer League, we have a Bolivian Veteran Soccer League, and then we also work on long-term rentals with groups like Polo Sports, DC Fray, Zog Sports, that are more of like your social type organizations. And they're often using those times that are big camp, right? That 9:30, 11 o'clock time frame. And then kind of, that attracts the younger age groups. So there's always, field spaces are a challenge. We're always looking at different ways to meet groups. We have huge drop-in. We try also with just drop-in on normal use. There's grass volleyball and sand volleyball leagues and such. So always an opportunity for more, but it's a lot out there.
You guys run some pickleball clinics and
Classes, currently starting to work on other type of pickleball tennis programming. We have ACTA, which is a large Arlington County tennis association that puts on leagues. So a lot of sports are represented in the county.
We do need more, people coming to our meetings, telling us. I didn't know.
Eric kind of talked a little bit about, on that front, I kind of knew this soccer thing went along and people sort of said, and again, it might be our own fault, like we really didn't know all that was being run by Arlington people. And I know they fill up, but it's interesting, like, I guess you just go to the website to find them, but they're not really advertised other than there.
So something we're continuing to do more and more, social media, on Instagram and paid targeting, and really getting out and focused on those people that are looking for it. Meetup groups, those kind of things. And so that's something we're continuing to work on. Our PR unit is great, and there's a concerted effort to that. Continuing to market all of our programs that we offer, but we rarely ever have to cancel a program due to enrollment. So thankfully, we have such an active community that's supportive of what's offered out there. So
I see Paul's hand is up.
Hi again. I have a couple of questions, and I hate to be the voice of doom and gloom, but I'm in the sector, and so I'm confronted every day with a new reality in Northern Virginia. And I noticed that of Representative Byer's funding that was federally secured, I think it was like $1 million that was secured by Representative Byer for trails, playground improvement, including, I think, Monroe Park Playground and possibly Arlington Boulevard Trail. And I can't quantify, but certainly some of the county budget comes from federal sources. I would like to know where federal policy diverges from, or when county policy diverges from federal policy. Are we anticipating that those funds are going to be pulled? And what is our plan to mitigate any disruption from loss of federal funding?
You want me to say what I know?
Please.
I mean, I'm just parroting what I saw on the video of the board meeting. But the county manager explained that that Arlington expects annually approximately $88 million transfer from the federal government to Arlington County. He has proposed a stabilization fund. There's already a stabilization fund of 22 million. He proposes putting in another 10 million this year, which would bring it up to 30 million-ish. And then there was a discussion about what the 88 million is comprised of. And the largest amount in that 88 million is housing vouchers. So like Section 8 subsidized housing vouchers. But that's all I know. If anybody knows more, please cover that. Okay, well, we had a really sad table, so I'll just continue the mostly what we decided was we needed to take a look at the list that Jane referenced that as she was leaving as to what is on the county manager's sites in the event that we have to do a lot of cuts. And we should take a look at that and decide if we agree with it or not. We talked about the criteria for how to prioritize what should be kept and what should be cut. And the first criteria was, what's going to cost us if we don't fund it? So for example, maintenance is going to cost us if we don't fund it. And under that category, we talked about meter management and invasive plant control, because as I preach all the time, that's natural capital. And if you don't maintain it, it's going to, go kaput. So in addition, so that's plus really, normally thought of maintenance. And also we put the teen program in that category, because if you lose a whole generation of teens, it's not going to be good for anybody. And then we secondly had a group of thoughts about this cost recovery program might help inform us as to how we should think about which programs should be cut or not cut. And I thought the pyramid idea was kind of interesting, but I don't know that much about it. So the idea that, if it's very personalized and there's a large subsidy, seems like that would be a good thing to cut, but I don't know exactly how it works. So I think we should all, take a look at that. And then we talked about other ways to come up with recreation that is not very costly. And one of the things came up was a bike convoy, and getting the kids to bike to school. Bike bus. Sorry, I wrote convoy because that's how I understand it. But people know about this, so I didn't know about it. But getting kids to ride their bikes to school, or maybe saving on buses. I don't know. So those are the things. Those are the summary. Is there anything else I missed? Yeah.
Are there any tables we missed?
No, we just had 4 tables. Is there any more from the?
Anyone from online, if you had any other questions or comments?
So for my side, I'll just say to my commission, you can say that we have another meeting on March 7th.
Our commission meeting is March 25th.
Sorry, March 25th. And I will try to get the draft letter to you guys maybe a couple of weeks in advance, so that we can actually have a robust discussion, because we do need to get it in after that meeting because their board is supposed to vote on the budget on April the 9th, and our next meeting is like the day before that or something. So, please be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, as homework from this meeting, I'm going to send out the attachment that we talked about, as well as the cost recovery, policies, if I can find them. And, I think that's it from us.
And our next meeting, the sports commission meeting will be the 27th, 2 days later. I'm not gonna promise to be 2 weeks ahead of time, but I will get a draft letter out to y'all before the meeting for the same reason we'll need to approve it at that meeting. That's all I have.
Any other questions or anything else that chairs or anyone else on the roundtable want to address?
Need to have alcohol.
With that said, thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone online.
Thank you, everybody. I think the